Good evening, good evening, good evening. My intro here, man. I have to wait on the green light to come on. I was sitting here waiting on my green light, and it came on.
I was faster than the green light.
Yeah, I'm all discombobulated. We had a live shot in Jacksonville, Alabama, which is an hour and a half away, and I'm flying in here late, a little later than usual, so I'm discombobulated. It's my fault. But we had a good time. We programmed weather radios and had a massive
Did you
crowd.
actually program them? That's impressive, James.
No, I don't.
Now they pitched that you were programming it. I saw this.
Yeah, I'm thinking, who wrote this commercial? That I can't do that. I'm doing the weather on television, and the minute I get off,
I was going to say, what are they going to stop for like 15 minutes for you to do the weather, or what?
Yeah, no, it was Brian Peters
to do that for you.
We had Brian.
Don't let that weather get in the way, James.
Yeah, really. No, we had Brian Peters was there. Brian, by the way, said to tell everybody hello. He's doing fine. And we had Charles Daniel and Megan Thomas and a cast to program the weather radios. And I was there to do the weather on TV and to just talk with people about whatever they wanted to talk about. And it was a massive crowd. So it worked out very well.
Did they talk about Alabama's number one basketball seed?
Who? No.
Hey, we're a number one seed. Please give us some credit here. It's in the NIT, but that's all right.
This was Jacksonville State. This was not Alabama.
I know. I'm just kidding. Working on my brackets over here for the NIT.
For those that don't know, that community was hit by an EF3 tornado a year ago, and tomorrow is the anniversary date, and so that's the reason we selected Jacksonville State. We thought we'd get in there and get it done tonight. So, thanks to the president and the mayor and everybody, even the football coach invited me to come down there to show me what I've got, and that wouldn't take very long.
To show what you got. You mean to actually play or to coach, be an assistant?
Yeah, they had spring practice going on down there. So you
were running some sprints and doing some drills and stuff?
Well, I thought about going down there and running a little bit for him. I can do a 50-yard dash, but I'm done after that. I'm done for the day. So
you work out with like MLB
fun,
players and NFL players and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, today I did, we did wall balls, we did medicine ball burpees, we did flash push-ups, like we do 10 of each and then run for 100 yards. Then you do 12 of each and run for 100 yards, 14 of each and run for 100 yards. It was strenuous for a man of my age.
Did any 355-pound
me?
Yeah, exactly.
Just exhausted me. I'm now too tired to do the show.
Did any NFL players crush you today while you were doing push-ups?
No, they just mocked us today. They make fun of us. Occasionally, they'll stand in their little pro area down there and laugh. And while they laugh, they point, which makes it even worse. But no,
that never happens to you, Alex Forbes, does it?
It does not, partially because I'm not a regular gym goer.
But I challenged Andre Smith. He's one of the guys that mocks me in there. This guy wants to do this. So we had the Tennessee Titans guy on the show last week. I said, so you think you're a weather weenie? You're not. You've not been on our show. We had Brett of the Titans on here before you've been on here.
He's a punter.
Yeah. So, but Andre seriously wants to go back to school when he retires, graduate in meteorology, and go to work for like ESPN or Fox Sports and be a professional meteorologist that helps them exclusively with sports, which I think is a needed position. They could use a little help. All right, so what have I not done here? I totally feel I typically get in here about 30 minutes before showtime and open up the pre-show 15 minutes before. But as I sat down here, I opened up everything. So I don't know what I've not done. But we'll figure it out.
Y'all get ready for my printer to go off. It's going to be very loud.
Nobody prints anything anymore.
I do.
You do when you got to read something from Trevor, the famous Trevor Boucher. You got to print it out so you can read it. Breaking news.
What? Breaking news? Do I need to play it?
Oh gosh.
I don't know if we're gonna have enough room for all of our guests tonight.
Where's Kevin been lately? Kevin's not been on this show in like
He's on here
3
now.
weeks.
He's here now. 1, 2,
He is
3,
there.
4,
Good.
5, 6, 7,
People have been
8.
asking, "Where's Kevin?"
Yeah.
All right, so we got to get
people
2
ask
more
us?
people in here. So no more regular panelists. No more weather brains.
We need
You mean people
proof.
saying, "Thank
We need
God
proof
Kevin's
of these
not there"?
people.
I think Bill overbooked our show tonight. He's got 15 guests,
Oh Lord.
10 slots.
This is Kim's fault.
Oh yeah.
And
My fault.
Scott-
Tell me more about that.
Kim Scott says he owes you a snake handler for whatever that means.
I'll leave then. That's why I haven't been on the show. Bill keeps overbooking.
That's my job in the hotel business, overbooking.
Oh. Wow.
Well, we have a cute 2-year-old on down to the right, Walker.
Mm-hmm.
1, 2, 3. I keep counting. There's one more slot and one more guest to go.
Walker, that's a very disturbing image there.
Thank you. I'm tired of looking at my shirt. It says
Wow.
"O," but it's supposed to say "O."
You see it backwards. We see it right.
Do you see it right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We see it right.
I was like, I don't want to be known as a hoe, so
Here's your show
That's the show,
title.
the show,
That's
show
show
title
title.
right there. Yeah, note down. I
This
don't
is
want to be known
Stormfront
as a
Freaks
hoe.
now.
Can I get a quote or part of it that says Aubrey didn't say this one?
Yeah.
Did not come from your female.
Boy, so Kim's already getting fan mail that just came in already.
Uh-oh.
I didn't see anything.
What does it say?
Kim, welcome back. So wonderful to see you back on WeatherBrains. Hope everything is going well for you and that life brings you tons of smiles and
Wow.
joys.
I didn't
Well,
get
Nobody
it.
ever sends. I'm about to say, when we're off, nobody sends anything to us.
I know.
Who are you?
It's like, oh, Bill's back. Great.
Yeah.
Feel bad now.
Well,
It's
thank
him
you,
again.
Thompson. Life is bringing me lots of joys, especially right now with our many guests.
Yeah, this is gonna. I sense a really good show here coming up. So we got to wait 60 seconds. It's 29:06, 07, 08, and then we'll hit the TV, and then we'll get started. I'm not hearing any weird this week, which is good.
I have quite a bit of noise on mine.
Yeah, I'm hearing a little bit of static.
There's some.
Have you paid,
again, if you
paid all
got-
your upgrade bills?
Yeah. Yeah. For those that weren't here a couple of weeks ago, I use a little virtual routing program and called Loopback. And I clicked on an upgrade button, and I didn't notice it's a paid upgrade. So they put this white noise on the channels until you pay $49. So I had to dish out $49 during the show.
And,
Better go
and
get the American Express.
coincidentally, right after that, Mark Zuckerberg sent out his pivot to privacy memo.
Yeah, that's right.
And welcome to our television viewers. It is now 30 minutes after the hour, and we are delighted that we have no severe storms. We have no flooding. We have no issues except a freeze warning. So there's nothing to watch on radar. You're stuck watching us. We get all kind of I get more comments on the TV, and I often forget we're on television. So thank you for watching on television. And I am hearing a little weird noise. So if anybody has any weird noise,
it
that's
just
probably
went
the best
away.
thing to do.
Nope, now it's
Yeah,
back.
the best.
Yeah, I hear it too.
So just everybody talk real loud, and you won't notice it.
There you
That's,
go.
that's the way to fix it.
Yeah, exactly. Just talk really loud, and nobody will know that somebody's got crappy audio. All right,
The plane
here we
is
go.
full now. We have all 10 guests.
Here we go. What is that noise? That is slightly obnoxious.
You might have to go down the line and have.
Yeah, just do roll call. Mute us all one at a time, then.
Well, let's just go on now. All right, here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. WeatherBrains episode number 687. This is the weekly show all about weather. This is for the 18th of March, 2019. What is that weird racket? Kevin, is that you?
Can mute and find out. Let's see. Here we go. Muting.
No, that's not you. Nope. We'll find the culprit here in a minute.
All right.
So, Kevin, where have you been? People have been asking.
Oh, I thought you were going to start again.
No.
No, well, there are things here. It's kind of like Aubrey's deal. Sometimes I have to deal with a Fox show, and sometimes I have to deal with some other things. But I've missed everyone, of course. I've been waiting 2 weeks to tell this great story. I was honored to be invited up to the National Weather Center by the folks at the Mesonet, Oklahoma Mesonet, because they put on a thing for law enforcement and EMA folks and whatnot, I think twice a year, called OK First. And it's an intensive week-long training thing that happens. And at the end of it, they have a media panel, and they get 6 or 7 media folks and a couple of Weather Service folks to come. And so I was invited, and so I drove up there and enjoyed that. And our friend Rick Smith was on the panel, and the MIC from the Tulsa office was there too. And so, somebody makes a few comments, and then they open it up for questions. And the second question came from the back of the room, is some law enforcement folks, and they said, "What do you guys think of social media, and how do you use it?" And Rick was sitting next to me, and he leaned over and he pulled the microphone and he whispered in my ear, "You're not allowed to answer."
or play this song.
Let's get social with social media.
So despite Rick's comment, I did not sit on my hands, and I answered and gave my social media speech, and they went on to the next thing. So anyway, missed all you guys.
So before we go on here, and we got a lot of things to do, but let's clarify: are you back on the social nets now, or are you not? I'm confused.
That's a really good question. I reactivated my Kevin Selly Twitter account. I do have a Facebook account again, primarily for one group that I was in that I got a lot of value out of, and so I had to go back there. But I don't post anything on my page or my profile. But I do use it for that group communication. I haven't posted much. I got back on largely because they sent out a mandate here at the television station that everybody shall be on social media and post, X number of times and stuff like that. And that really hasn't been enforced. So I'm kind of in limbo there. I don't know if they, don't notice, or if they're afraid to say something to me, or what. But
they apparently don't watch this show, do they?
No, they definitely don't watch this show. But I mean, if you, we don't want to go there now because we have so many guests. But that podcast I referenced a couple of weeks ago, Shoshana Zuboff on the Kara Swisher podcast, and I've started Shoshana's book, which is really interesting. But boy, there's a lot of things even coming out since that podcast that it really is a struggle to get in all seriousness. I really think that Facebook in particular, and Google's taking a lot of heat, but Facebook in particular is doing damage. And I almost, and we don't want to talk about it now, but it almost goes back to years past in the conflict that you had when you left Channel 6. And it's that deep for me, and maybe we'll talk about that on another show.
Okay, we'll do it. Troy, are you conflicted? Do you have a deep internal issue with anybody tonight?
What is this, the counseling channel or what? I mean,
yes.
The psychiatrist
I've been conflicted, Bill, for many, many years. But I'm doing very well tonight. Our weather's been beautiful in Austin, and this week, James, the end of this week and this weekend, I get to meet Aubrey in person.
Oh,
we're gonna be meeting up in Starkville at Mississippi State for the Severe Weather Symposium.
Oh, we're going to tear up
Bruce
Starkville.
Thomas and I are going to be there. Yeah.
It's your show title.
No, that is the show title, and we're going to tear up Starkville.
Yep.
Wow. So the Southeast Severe Symposium is this weekend, and I wish there was a way I could get over there. Maybe I'll slip over there on Saturday. So when do you two arrive?
James.
Did you get there on Friday? Is that the day you two arrive?
I'm going to go into Memphis and then down to Tupelo, I guess, on Thursday, and then hang around Northeast Mississippi for a day or so, then go to Starkville Friday evening, and then stay there through Sunday evening, back to Tupelo, and then back to Austin on Monday.
Wow.
Yep.
The Golden
I think-
Triangle Tour.
Yeah.
I think I get in around 6-ish or something like that, but I should be in the early evening
Yeah.
on Friday.
Now, do you fly into Golden Triangle, Aubrey, or Memphis or Birmingham? How do you get
I
there?
fly into Columbus.
Yeah, Golden Triangle. Yeah.
Is that Golden
Yeah,
Triangle?
GTR.
Okay.
GTR.
Oh, I
That's
arrive
awesome.
at 8. Oh, wait, that's not it. I arrive at 3:30. Oh, we are tearing up Starkville.
I'll meet up with you.
Get ready, Alex. You got trouble coming.
Oh yeah.
Oh, boy.
We have this going on, but now we also have women's basketball for the March Madness.
Another number 1 seed, by the way.
Yeah. And then we have going on in Starkville. So I think there might be more people here this weekend than there has been in like 5 years.
Really?
Wow.
Uh-oh. Hope you already got your hotel rooms, guys.
I do.
And don't forget the men's basketball. They're seeded number 5 in the NCAA. Women's team seeded number 1. Baseball team doing very well. It's a fun time to be in Stark Vegas, Mississippi.
All right.
So the question is, Kim, welcome back, by the way. I hope everything is well. You were a little feeling low last week. You look good this week.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I apologize if my voice ever goes in and out. I'm on the tail end, but recovering from, some illness that just keeps going around and going around and going around. So I'm excited for the spring to come. I can tell you that.
Okay, so on a nosy personal question before Bill takes over and brings in all of our guests here. So I see my friend Tim Marshall has been to Lee County, Alabama to do the engineering type work. When are you coming to Lee County, Alabama to do the social type work that we need?
Yeah, I'm going to actually be out in Alabama next week. I'm looking at next Sunday through Wednesday. I'll be doing some stuff in Alabama and Georgia, and I'll be in touch with you guys. It'd be wonderful to see you when I get to town. I'm going to probably be coming into Birmingham first, and then go south and east from there. So,
Bill, I detect a
coming.
WeatherBrains internal meetup here coming, so that's good.
I'll be in
Fun.
Ireland, so that's not going to be. I'm going to be no use for this one.
What?
Oh boy, come on, man! So a true weather weenie never leaves Dixie Alley during March, April, or May. I mean, come on.
You do for your 11-year-old's choir trip, believe me.
Wow.
But no, my one of my buddies is the EMA director for Lee County, Alabama, Kathy Carson, and we have been playing phone tag, and she really, I could tell by her voicemail messages, she just kind of wanted to talk, and I know that she's been frustrated, but she's done a great job. She is one of the best county EMA directors in our state. She's just fantastic, but I cannot wait to hear what the social scientists have to say about the high loss of life, in which 23 people died from a single event. And then this past Thursday, we had an event with 16 tornadoes and no loss of life. And, the same mourning process, we're doing the same thing. It's just the outcome is different in some cases. So I can't wait for you to come down here and figure this out. But Bill, bring in all of these guests. We got a packed house here tonight.
Yeah, we got a full plane tonight. There's no question about it, James. March is National Weather Podcast Month, and it's a chance for us to highlight some of the outstanding infotainment that's being produced by creative meteorologists all over the country. The podcasts including Ice Station Houseman, Weather Hype, Stormfront Freaks, B Squared, California Weather Group, or Carolina Weather Group, and us here at WeatherBrains spend the month promoting each other by sharing content and sharing panelists. And tonight we welcome a guest from the Carolina Weather Group, Chris Jackson. Welcome to the show.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Now, Chris, was it once called the Carolina Weather Gang, or did I imagine that?
As far as I know, it's always been the Carolina Weather Group.
Okay, so I guess I probably referred to it as that last week, probably blurring it with the Capital Weather Gang. So,
right.
CWG. But tell us a little bit about yourself real quick.
Yeah, just me. From South Carolina. I'm actually in Columbia right now. Gamecock fan my whole life. So SEC, yeah, totally get it. spent 15 years as a professional firefighter. Did special operations stuff. I was a swift water rescue instructor. Decided in 2017 to kind of start pursuing weather. I started running a personal blog here in South Carolina. Got kind of popular. I've been chasing storms for about 4 or 5 years now, and just continue to grow. And weather's always been my passion. So I decided to take a leap of faith, and that's where I'm at now. Just between blogging, storm chasing, everything else, and it's going good. It's been a great change.
Talk about the podcast for a minute. It's one of my favorite weather podcasts for sure.
Absolutely, and they've been doing the weather podcast now for a little over 5 years, and they brought me in last year. They had me on, I think in March, just right after March or April last year. I actually did a chase down in Alabama with the EF1 in Russellville. And, I come on and talked about my chase after that. And, a couple months later, I came on the show as a panelist. And ever since then, we've been going great. And, we're just trying to get good guests and have good content and, have relevant conversations that affect everybody, from civilians to the entire weather enterprise.
Y'all got a slew of good panelists on there now, too. So,
we're doing everything.
Really good looking lineup.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, great. Well, it's good to have you here tonight.
Absolutely.
You're deputized to ask lots of questions and be really involved. So we're glad you're here. So you have to jump in, though. It's like dinner at the table with 9 other kids.
I'm good with that.
Good. You have to yell really loud. So, but we're glad you're here. So thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
I want to spend just a minute with our special guest panelist tonight, meteorology student at Mississippi State University. He's in charge of this year's Southeast Severe Storm Symposium. Alex Forbes, welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
I remember when you were like a 17-year-old kid running around the WeatherFest in Norfolk taking video, and you brought the house down with a video that we still use to this day that captures the essence of that event, Alex. So talk about how you've progressed in your career in meteorology there at Mississippi State. You're obviously doing something right. They put you in charge of the symposium. Either something right or something wrong, I guess.
Yeah. So since then, I've started here at Mississippi State. I started in fall of 17 as a freshman, and I've since started the broadcast meteorology track. So I'm well on my way there through the second semester class in that. And then also picking up random things here or there. I joined the executive board of our local AMS NWA chapter last year as symposium chair, and then I'm secretary this year. And I've still got 2 years ahead of me, so who knows where that will go.
Well, congratulations. It's great to have you here. Take us I want to spend some more time with you after the recorded segments, but we're going to get around to our guests here in a minute. So talk just for a brief minute. Give us a little overview. I know you're going to have to go ahead and have the police surveilling Aubrey when she gets to town, and now she's got a collaborator in her presence too. So other than security concerns, give us some of the highlights, Alan.
Yeah, so this year's agenda is pretty awesome. We were sitting there trying to figure out time slots and where people are going to go, and we were looking at the abstract sitting in front of us and couldn't believe that this was our symposium that's going to be happening this weekend. So we have people from 5 different Weather Service offices: Jackson, Mississippi, Memphis, Tennessee, Birmingham, Mobile, and Nashville. We've got 6 schools represented, which I think is the most this symposium has had. We've got University of Alabama at Huntsville, Alabama Tuscaloosa, University of Tennessee in Knoxville, Western Kentucky, University of Louisiana Monroe, and us here at Mississippi State. And then we've got presenters from 7 different TV stations from around the country, including Brant Beckman from KNBN in Rapid City, who was a graduate student last year. And then Aubrey from Harrisonburg. We've got Janice Huff coming from New York City. But then we also have local speakers, including Alex Puckett from WCBI, the TV station that was hit by the tornado a couple weeks ago. And then a couple more graduates and non-graduates from Mississippi State.
Yeah, we're excited about having Mr. Puckett and his group on April 8th. We're really excited about that. But I know they'll be telling their story at your place. But we want to hear a little bit more, get into the theme and some other things, and right after the recorded segments. And you've been deputized as a panelist too, Alex. So you have to jump in and raise your hand and throw yourself into the fracas tonight. So we're glad you're here.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, tonight's guest weatherbrains are geographers who study the intersections of physical and social vulnerability for tornadoes. Dr. Stephen Strader and Walker Ashley, welcome to the show tonight. It's good to have you here. We got a lot we want to talk about, but we're glad you're here.
Thank you.
Now, Kim, you put this show together.
Mhm.
Do you want to lead the questioning tonight? I'm glad to talk as much as you want me to, but I sense you're kind of foaming at the mouth over there to get the conversation started. So we'll let you take the lead here.
I'll get the ball rolling, but I have a feeling after talking with Walker and Stephen earlier today that they're going to bring up some issues that will draw questions and commentary from everybody. So I'll just, for these two, all I have to do is a little bit of poking the bear and we're off to the races. All right, so I want to open up to Walker and Stephen. Just introduce yourselves. Maybe let's start with Walker. Tell us a little bit about what it is that you study. Bill gave a really nice general introduction, but maybe a little bit more detail, and what got you into weather in the first place?
Oh boy, I've always been a weather geek for ever since I remember as a kid, and in fact, I was musing through my mother's house in Atlanta last year. I came across some drawings from when I was probably 5 or 6 years old of tornadoes affecting I drew tornadoes affecting cities. So here I am 30 or 40 years later studying the same material. So I've always had an affinity for weather. I grew up on the Weather Channel in the 1980s. I'm an old Weather Channel fiend. And I had a couple of events in the 1990s. F2 tornado killer one struck my father's farm town in White Plains, Georgia. That was a F4 that killed 5 people. That's actually a remnant of the Birmingham, I believe the Jefferson County F5 supercell that moved over into Georgia and tracked through that area later that evening. And then later on in that decade, in 1998, I was affected by my mother's house was struck by another killer tornado, that one an F2. So I've had some events in the 1990s that spurred even more interest in tornadoes. And I went through geography and meteorology programs and landed here at Northern Illinois University in 2005 as a professor. And I teach at the intersection of meteorology, climatology, and disasters. And study all aspects of that, from climate change, atmospheric storms, to obviously the vulnerabilities throughout the Mid-South.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And I hate to say it, Walker, but I think you may be the cause of some of the static we were hearing earlier. And you're saying such wonderful things. Maybe since earlier today when we did your sound check, it was working wonderfully. Maybe if you can leave rejoin,
Sure.
maybe that'll help a little bit. Let's see if that works.
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. So while we're having him do that, Stephen, I'm going to turn to you with the same question. Tell us a little bit about your work and what got you into weather. And also, go ahead and tell us, for the audience that may not be familiar with you guys, the connection between you and Walker.
Yeah, first we have to talk about Walker as much as possible while he's gone. So say all the bad stuff we have to say now. As his
Give us the truth.
Yeah, well, as his former PhD and master's student, I think I now. Oh, I keep. All right, nobody.
Okay, right. Yeah.
So I was a high school student during the Evansville 2005 tornado that killed 25 individuals. It was a mile from my house. It was a very important event that kind of illustrated what I wanted to do with my life, and I spent the next 10 years going from undergraduate degree to getting my master's and PhD, where I worked with Walker, and really since about 2010, 2012, we've really started to work really hard on looking at this intersection of social science and physical science, and as it relates to not just tornadoes, but all meteorological hazards. And it's just that we found a mutual fascination with investigating the tornado hazard, and have continued to sort of build upon years and years of work where we're trying to better understand not only the physical elements of these events, but also the societal elements as well as it pertains to the disaster. So we're really, and of course, obviously, we're working with Kim and some others, and trying to get at this issue, particularly in the Southeast.
Yeah, well, since you've started the topic, tell us a little bit more about that. I understand that the work that you're doing, and the work that we're doing together, we can discuss the project in a second. But the program that brought us together is Vortex Southeast. Could you tell us a little bit about that program and how it is that you built some work into that? What was the niche that you saw that you wanted to fill?
Yeah, so the Vortex Southeast is only a few years old now. It's funded by NOAA. I think roughly 10 to 15 people are funded every year. But it's really designed to take those ideals from the Vortex original projects that look primarily at the physical science, going out collecting field data. But there's a second element that's been added to that because of the Southeast landscape, and that's the societal element. And I really jumped at this opportunity, and really, Walker and I both did, even from the beginning days to the project, where we wanted to use this as an opportunity to, focus in not just working with physical scientists, but social scientists, wind engineers, structural engineers, emergency managers, media, etc. And the whole idea, really, believe it or not, some of the funded projects started as a conversation that Walker and I had at the Severe and Local Storms Conference in Portland, Oregon, on Election Day, of all places. And it went from there, and it's kind of ballooned into this sort of fascination that's mixed with sort of sometimes sadness, like the last couple of weeks, mixed with really having determination to sort of investigate not only the tornado events, but who they're affecting. And the Vortex Southeast has been a really good avenue for that, and I hope it continues. And there's a lot of really interesting results coming out where we're starting to work cross-disciplinary, which we can maybe discuss is really important to solving this tornado issue as it pertains not just to the Southeast, but just about anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell us a little bit about the project that you put together. Who all did you assemble, and what are some of the aims for specifically what it is that you were so inspired by back in 2016?
Yeah, so the team consists of really myself and Walker, who are, I would consider us really physical scientists. Both of us are trained as meteorologists. We could forecast the weather. We can look at physical elements of meteorological events, but we sort of have this geographic perspective, which comes with being able to make maps and do spatial analyses. Well, taking sort of that, what I like to think of as my research blurring the lines, or just living in between two worlds, bringing on individuals like yourself, which I believe we asked you very quickly in the program to say, we want to bring in a social scientist and get the perspective of individuals, whether it be at the National Weather Service, media partners, or the mobile home, permanent home residents in the Southeast. But it wasn't enough to go there. We brought on Michael Ignato, who was formerly at the University of Maryland. He's now at Walter Reed Institute with the Army. He's continued to be a big driving force of our, what I would say, boots on the ground research, where we're going in and actually interviewing individuals and learning about how they understand tornado events. His right-hand person would be Kevin Ash, who is now an assistant professor at the University of Florida. And then last but not least, we brought on a structural engineer, which is David Roosh, who's David Pravat's former student at University of Florida. And David has continued great engineering work, which I would say is parallel to that of a Tim Marshall and David Pravat to begin with, and some others that are out there as well. He's part of that community, and believe it or not, he's an assistant professor at Auburn and has been really valuable during this Beauregard event, where he's able to go down and collect very quick data, and he's been an invaluable member to furthering our research.
Yeah, absolutely. So all of this research is really about manufactured mobile home populations. And Walker, I think, did you just try to join again?
Am I still bad?
Yeah, you're still bad. I might.
Let me turn it off and try the webcam. We'll see if that works. I doubt it'll work any better.
I would unplug the device you're using too, and then do a reboot.
Have you tried turning it off and on again? Off and on again. Off and on again.
Sorry. Oh, wow.
Oh, it's just not a complete show until we bring that out.
No.
It's just not. Okay, well, while Walker works to get everything working on his side, we're going to keep badgering you, Stephen.
I'm used to talking for him anyway. He's just I've blown past him in my career. He's just in my rearview mirror. I clearly don't have any.
Wow.
Just kidding. He's probably on all my. He's on all our. We're on each other's publications, and I give him a hard time because, well, I'll pay for it later. That's all I'll have to say.
Now, we do need to note, though, that you became pretty famous last week after the events of the May 3rd tornadoes, or the March 3rd tornadoes, sorry. With the research that you've been doing, you were able to provide some quick analyses to the Twitter universe that were quickly picked up by media outlets. Can you describe a little bit of what that was that you were conveying and who picked it up?
Yeah, so it was kind of, I don't like to think that there's anything special to sort of being picked up on social media, except for getting a few special tweets from individuals. But the reality is the timing of the event was incredibly important. What was really interesting was David, our field, David Roosh, who's at Auburn, was really close to the event. And I said, hey, be on the lookout. There's storms headed your way, not just from a standpoint of collecting data, but from a safety standpoint. I was concerned. And Walker messaged me and said, here, look at this rotation data, and I found out that you can get the data from the MRMS program at the NSSL. And I was able to quickly make some quick and dirty maps using the research data that we've created for our project. And I not only provided those maps to David so he could go into the field the next day and find out where these individual structures were and figure out how they were destroyed or damaged, but also I just decided to tweet those and I cleaned them up a little bit, put them out there to illustrate really the problem that our entire project tries to encapsulate with the Southeast, in particular with tornadoes.
Yeah, so those they just kind of lit up the Twitter universe as soon as you put them out.
Well, it was really it's an event that I think is very indicative of our work. So the main purpose of the Vortex Southeast project that I'm heading up is we've really been able to assess. We've known forever that mobile homes and are more vulnerable than permanent homes. But what we haven't been able to assess until recently is getting at the very fine scale nature of not only how many mobile homes are in Alabama, but where they're precisely located. And then comparing that against permanent homes. It's not just about the structures either. It's about the individual that lives in those mobile homes. And that's why we brought on individuals like yourself, Kim. So what my component of the project, and it's really just now kind of coming to fruition, is, I spent the better part of last summer in my office, listening to podcasts, watching videos, but I was creating GIS data that was trying to find the precise location of just about every mobile home, about 90% of the total mobile homes in Alabama. So I have this data that says, essentially, it's little yellow dots on a map that represent every location of by a far away majority of mobile and permanent homes in Alabama. Well, that gives us something that we can then examine in real time or after the event to look to see, where these individuals live. And I was taking that data and illustrating that, some statistics just based on the Beauregard event where, roughly there was about 169 mobile homes in the path. And I could assess that immediately based on my data and the rotational data that I downloaded from the internet. And then if you actually break that down, comparing it to mobile homes, what we really found out was that a majority, 33% of homes in the path of that Beauregard event were actually mobile homes. Well, Alabama's percentage of mobile homes is about 13%. So this event, one of the reasons this event was probably so bad, and I don't even want to say probably, one of the reasons this event was bad was because there was a large percentage of mobile homes that were affected. But it goes more than just the mobile homes. It's the individual vulnerabilities that we can now dive into now that we know where these mobile homes are.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell us a little bit more about what you mean by the individual vulnerabilities. So, for example, one of the things you'd been doing that's recently published work, I believe, was looking at the distribution of mobile homes in the South compared to the plains. Can you tell us about that?
Well, until I really created this data set, which, I tell people I hate myself because I spent hours and hours and months putting little yellow dots on a map where I found mobile homes, and I used parcel data. And then when I was done with Alabama, I said, let's do Kansas. And the reason being is because time and time again, we've heard, yeah, there's just a greater number of mobile homes in the Southeast. Unfortunately, it's not just that simple. It's much more complex than this. For example, if you look at where mobile homes are located in Alabama, they're not found in mobile home parks quite as much. Roughly 80% of mobile homes in Alabama, particularly, are found in those rural areas. And if you talk to anybody that lives in those, that's from Alabama, they've seen this. They drive down the road, they see mobile homes isolated on parcels that are not found in mobile home parks. But we've actually been able to quantify that in a scientific way and compare that against, say, Kansas, where mobile homes are only found in mobile home parks. Well, what that relates to is that more dispersed mobile home spatial pattern. Those mobile homes that are found in those more rural and exurban areas equates to greater impacts of tornado events. Beauregard event, there was no mobile home park impacted. Yet we have roughly some statistics that I've come up with is, and these are preliminary statistics, is roughly 17 of the 21 deaths we know the circumstance of in Beauregard were in mobile homes. So that's 80% of all people killed in the Beauregard event were found in mobile homes. If you look in terms of fatality rates, if you that's roughly the Beauregard event's about 10 deaths per mobile home. And then if you compare that against permanent homes is about 1 death per 100 home. So it's a factor of 10 greater just because mobile homes were present. And these are numbers to the statistics and things we suspected for years and years and years.
Stephen, Troy Kimmel here from Austin. I'm going to take this thing way back, and you may make fun of me after I ask this, but years ago, yeah, Bill, I know you'd laugh. But years ago, Stephen, I taught a law enforcement class, a spotter class up in Northeast Mississippi. And one thing that the folks there told me, talking to them about tornadoes and that sort of thing, and they say, oh, we know tornadoes because we see the tornadoes in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And my response to that is, if you think you're going to see a tornado in Northeast Mississippi like it looks like in Oklahoma, where Oklahoma has 3 trees and 4 hills, check the geography, you're sadly mistaken. And I wonder, Stephen, if that is still an issue that you think in 2019 is still out there. Do people expect to see that Oklahoma tornado in Dixie Alley?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Troy. And some of that Kim can speak to as well, since she's part of our team after all, and she's much more of an expert on this than I am. When we think of the vulnerability of the Southeast, it's really a combined number of factors. From a physical standpoint, we have really low cloud bases. We have low LCLs. We have storms that typically end up being very wide and rain wrapped, and that hurts the visibility of the events. You don't see them coming. Well, another factor is the storms are moving 60 miles per hour oftentimes. Yeah. Yep. So you have less time to react. And we know from a standpoint of social science that individuals will seek secondary confirmation, that they will hear, they'll get the warning, and then they'll they'll text a friend, they'll go look outside, they'll turn on the TV. And these are seconds that matter in these situations. And a lot of this is related to the physical structure of the storm and not being able to see them. Good example was something that if Walker was here, he could speak to is the issue with nighttime tornadoes as well in the Southeast. But from a social science standpoint, we also know that these individuals, or we've learned, is these individuals that are specifically living in mobile homes know more than we give them credit for. They're very aware, more than we think, of the tornado events around them. They're very aware of the risk that's going on. Unfortunately, there's a breakdown from them taking protective action. And we don't know if it's based on just not having the ability to take protective action, like fleeing to a shelter, or if they're just rolling the dice and saying, well, hopefully it doesn't hit here. We're trying to solve that issue as we speak now. And that's totally the problem is we've learned and we've seen since really 2011, at least before then, we've had hints of it, that to solve the issue, it's much more than just warning the events more frequently, warning the events with greater lead time. There's other factors we have to consider, and we're trying to dive in and get to that. And that's why we have to work together with physical scientists, social scientists, wind engineers, IWT, media partners, EMs, et cetera. It's going to take all of us to solve the issue.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thanks.
Yeah, and it's too bad that Walker still hasn't rejoined us because for those who are listening who aren't familiar, he probably wrote the paper that's most often cited. That it's a 2007 paper in Weather and Forecasting that talks about the causes of death from tornadoes and sort of these physical factors combined with the socio-demographic factors that lend themselves to increased mortality. And there are things like living in a mobile manufactured home, but also tornadoes that happen at night. And wow, speak of the devil, I was just talking about you. It's like your ears were burning. All right, Walker, how are we doing on the sound? Are you ready to try?
Is it working?
No.
You even tried turning it off and on again.
Windows updates too.
Oh, wow.
Let me try one more thing.
Okay, he's gonna.
I
think it's in his
I would
mic.
say, yeah, up there in the settings, you might want to check the audio settings, that little gear, and just check your audio device and be sure the right one is selected, because oftentimes that's the problem. So I would love to get you on here because we have 10,000 questions for you.
Is that better?
Oh,
Well, see,
Bingo.
Much better.
I was using the fancy snowball.
Yeah.
And
Always a bad idea.
It apparently doesn't work anymore. So
I'm using my Apple AirPods.
and
you didn't want to hear from me anyway.
what are you on?
Oh,
Are you
yes,
are you on the onboard mic now? Because if you can get closer to it, that would be even a little better.
Are you sure you want to see my face that close? But
Yeah,
I'm on the webcam.
It sounds good. It sounds great.
That's wonderful. Well, I'm so glad that we got you back. I was just about to talk about your 2007 paper because Stephen introduced the idea of all of the sort of combination of physical and social vulnerabilities that we know now lead to increased fatality rates. I do want to actually offer you the chance, since you had sort of static earlier on. I think it'd be great if you could give that introduction to yourself again, because you had a really compelling set of life circumstances that brought you into weather that I don't think should be missed, and that actually attach you also to this geography. So could you tell us again a little bit about your background, what got you into weather, and then go ahead and talk a little bit about what got you into this vulnerability research and what you found in that paper.
Sure, now I can change my story completely. So I started off in a modeling career when I had hair. No, I was I grew up in the 80s. I'm a child of the 80s of Georgia. And if you know anything about the history of the Weather Channel, that's out of Atlanta. And I remember going to the Weather Channel as a Cub Scout. I remember watching the 20 minutes after the hour, they always had the 5-day update, the 5-day forecast. And I was always looking for that white sliver in North Georgia to give us snow. That never materialized, it seemed. But as I got a little older, in 1992, there was a devastating tornado in my father's farm town of White Plains, Georgia, that actually killed a number of folks. And I have distinct memories of that, literally mowing down, very similar to what you had 2 weeks ago in Alabama, just mowing down these pine forests, and the smell of pine, that sort of beautiful smell that you have around all this devastation was still sticks to me. And then a little bit later on in 1998, my mother's house in Atlanta, north side of Atlanta, was impacted by a different killer tornado. That was an F2 in the Chamblee and Dunwoody area. So I took those experiences. I was always a weather geek and loved every aspect of weather, and went on to the University of Georgia, received a BS in geography. At the time, they didn't have a MET program. I know James been over there now, and Marshall and Tom Moat and all those folks have started a nice program. Then I went on to Nebraska, and then I'm back to Georgia for my PhD. My graduate work was all in derechos, so long live windstorms. That I sit in in northern Illinois, where we seem to get a lot of those now. And I went into 05, 06, and 07 and just became fascinated by the risk, but also the vulnerability of tornadoes from where I grew up, the Mid-South, the interlacing sort of poverty, socioeconomic issues with what is undoubtedly some of the riskiest territory in the world for tornadoes. And so I combined that. My goal was to say that 12% of tornado fatalities are mobile homes and 30% are this and that. my lofty goal. It was unrealistic. But what I found at the conclusion of that 2007 paper was that it's multifactorial. There's a lot of different commingling vulnerabilities and risks in the South. And on the flip side, the Great Plains doesn't have generally those vulnerabilities, even though they have a pretty good risk as well. And so what you see is a pattern, and you know this well, certainly from the recent events, is this pattern of mortality in the South that we just don't get in the Great Plains or the Tornado Alley region.
Yeah,
So continue that work since then.
Yeah, and that's where Stephen just brought us. He was talking a little bit about this event, what he's uncovered with others on the research team about what was exposed from his data set that he created, and how many of the exposed perished, and how that sort of differs from other kinds of, if you had other kinds of housing in the way, what that might have looked like instead. So I think your work is, it has a lot to say about what we're talking about. And certainly it's been the conversation this past week, as we know.
Yep.
So I'm so glad that we have you back, because I think, Stephen, as much as you are good at bringing up really great points, I'd say that Walker is probably the bear poker, because he's also sort of the sarcastic one of the two of you. And
he also has tenure though. So
I've learned that doesn't mean much up here.
And he doesn't have a conscience either. So, and
Walker, I'm looking to step down as accelerant. So if you want that position, you can have that too.
It is good to have accelerant on the show.
I have a question. If you're at a pause moment, Kim, it changes gears a little bit, but we talked about this manufactured home thing's come up for some weeks now, and we had a guest on some weeks ago, and this will sound like a stupid question at the outset, but for Walker and Stephen, I would love to have your comments, if you have any, on why the manufactured home industry is pushing back so hard. And the obvious reason is obvious. They don't want negative press about their product. But since about 2008, their sales numbers have been on a pretty steady incline. And I don't want to say that they're not telling the truth, but in many cases, they seem to be walking along that razor's edge. And I would love comments from either of you, if you have any.
Well, I think you know why. At the end of the day, it's money. It's dollar signs. And I will argue that the product these days is quite a bit different than that was produced 10 or 20 years ago. There's no doubt. But if we don't follow code, and we don't follow tie downs, and we don't follow what the engineers tell us, who cares how recent that manufactured home was created? At the end of the day, it always comes back down to money.
And do they not think that by more carefully monitoring, or even in some way, shape, or form enforcing the rules or the requirements, that would help them, or are they just not thinking that far?
Well, that would oftentimes require them money. Mm-hmm. And why would they want that responsibility? That's extra costs imparted upon them when it should be up to the local jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. I mean, for a permanent house, right? We don't put the permanent house manufacturers through that sort of rigmarole. So I don't think the Manufactured Housing Association is going to appreciate that either.
Right. No, and like I said, we know the answer, but at the same time, I just wonder if there's any other influences that you guys can think of, or some excuses.
To me, what's interesting is how and I don't have any, issues with the manufactured housing industry. They're making an affordable house, but it doesn't commingle well with winds.
Yeah.
And, I just wish, it seems as though recently they seem to have infiltrated the weather community, and the sort of the angle that they're pushing is, it just seems odd to me, and it seems weird. And I wish we would push a little bit more back in their face as to, let's go walk through these communities that have been impacted.
Yes.
You walk with me hand in hand, and let's see what's going on.
Yeah.
Let's walk with the engineers.
You exactly made my point. It seems odd, and it seems weird. I don't understand why they would come and push back on people that are trying to do a good job and inform people and protect people, rather than transferring some of that energy in a more productive direction that would really be helpful.
And let me just say this. So at the NWA, I don't know how many of you were in there. Bill, what was this thing? The Broadcasters Sunday? I forget what day this was, when MHI had a program. And they went on for 40 minutes. It was almost like they were trying to sell us some manufactured home. And again, I am their biggest supporter. There are a lot of pockets in my state where manufactured housing is offered of wonderful, affordable housing, a great lifestyle. I'm their best friend. But after all this malarkey, all these people were chicken to say anything. It was some publicist from Los Angeles or somewhere, some PR lady. And everybody was looking back there at the back table to me. And they know I'm the guy that's going to have the nerve to stand up and say something. So I just said, stop the mumbo jumbo. What are you asking us to do? Do you want us to say on television that manufactured housing is safe during a tornado? And that's basically what they want us to do. And that's not a way of treating your best friend. It's like cars. I think they're great. I use them every day. I drive to schools in them. I come to work in them. They're marvelous. We all need them, but they're a death trap during a tornado. What is this MHI effort? And the question for you, here's my question for Kim and for Walker and for Stephen. Do you believe the messages being sent from MHI are contaminating the action plan of these people in the path of tornadoes in the Dixie Alley down here that live in mobile homes?
I don't know if it's gotten to that level. I mean, I can't imagine it. These very vulnerable populations often have things that are far, far more, in front of them than what the manufactured housing industry is saying. So I'm not concerned about how the manufactured housing industry plays in rural Alabama. What I am worried about is how it plays in our National Weather Service offices, in our emergency management offices, and in FEMA. And most importantly, the connections they have with HUD. HUD is the Bible bearer of code. And so if I believe that there should be strengthening, or if an engineer comes along and says there should be strengthening, we should improve our codes and all this sort of stuff, that's where I'm concerned, because HUD is at the end of the line. What HUD says is usually what goes.
So can you tell us a little bit about, when you were talking about mobile home populations in the South having more in front of them, can you tell us what you mean by that?
Well, it's hard. I don't want to speak. It's not like I can speak holistically for permanent house people as this one monolithic, or manufactured housing as this one monolithic. So we got to be real careful with that. But in general, if we look at the statistics, if you go look at Stephen as first author on that paper, he did some great work overlaying the census data that get at vulnerabilities. So poverty, educational attainment, single family household, sort of just things like that overlay, that create these vulnerabilities. Most often it comes down to socioeconomic status and low socioeconomic status, which means they need to worry about food on the table, worry about getting to work, worry about getting their kids to and from school. They're not worried about tie downs or the manufactured housing industry or what the hell HUD means. These are people that are dealing with real life situations, and we have to appreciate that and put ourselves in their shoes.
Yeah, and just sort of piggyback on that is some unique aspect that's starting to surface out of this tornado event, the Beauregard event, is with David being in the field doing some of the damage surveys. One thing was very apparent within the first day was that, one, we know that it's a violent tornado and straps wouldn't have made a big difference. Two, we found that most of them, there was no straps, there was no reinforcement, even from the sense of legal versus illegal reinforcement. There was nothing. So we had a lot of rolls, and we see that time and time again. Well, what David and I did is spend maybe half a day looking for the laws that were in place. And there's great laws that say, any mobile home built after this date is required to have tie downs, is required to be, any manufacturer who's going to build a mobile home has to meet these requirements. And if they don't, they're fined. Well, there's no enforcement of that, because how do you find that person who's trying to live paycheck to paycheck, put food on the table, and say, you don't have tie downs, so good luck, So there's a disconnect there. And the problem is not necessarily the mobile home lobby or anything like that. It's the fact that the problem's almost too big to tackle at that scale. So I would agree with Walker that, when we're infiltrating some of the problems into the National Weather Service, into emergency management and things like that, that's where we're starting to see this big issue arise and get kind of kicked under the table. So we're seeing it even with recent events. And this event was very telling from a standpoint of protection. Yeah, the mobile homes, some of them were built way after the laws were in place for tie downs. There was no tie downs. So
it isn't just manufactured housing. I was speaking of spending a lot of time in rural Georgia, and my grandmother's house was a 2-story house. Must have been built in the early 1900s, and it was on cinder blocks. It's a stick-built home, but it might as well be a 2-story manufactured house. And there is a lot of that throughout the rural South and even some of our urban areas. And so I don't want to just point to manufactured houses, although as we saw a couple of weeks ago, that is an issue. But also it's just in general weak frame and weakly reinforced housing and lack of any sort of infrastructure to tie those houses to the earth.
Well, going at the statistics for the fatalities is we know 3 of the deaths were in a permanent home. Well, we know the location of that home, and you can see it on Google Maps. David's taking pictures of it. For lack of a better word, it was as weak, if not weaker, than a mobile home. It was essentially a shack that was considered a permanent home, but from a structural integrity standpoint, it didn't matter. So we can talk, black versus white in terms of the heads versus tails. It doesn't matter. We're still dealing with this poor structural quality, and the reality is poverty is the bigger control of that. And that's sort of what we keep seeing time and time again. It's just that poverty tends to be linked to mobile home residents, but in the South, it's kind of a crapshoot. Permanent, really nice permanent home gets destroyed, EF4 damage. Shack get destroyed, EF2 damage, right? So all this stuff plays into how we look at these events and makes it really difficult to get at, extremely difficult.
And let me say something too. I know the rural South better than most on this show. I'm from the rural South. I am from Butler County, Alabama. And here's one thing, everybody. And again, I totally understand that there's some pockets of extreme poverty where people can't afford to buy a $30 weather radio. But I will see in many cases a lot of folks that live in manufactured housing or a poorly built, site-built home that's just sitting on a slab with gravity. But I see them with ATVs that are worth $2,000, $3,000. I mean, I see them with some pretty fancy hunting gear. And the question I have from a society standpoint, a social science standpoint, what do you do to convince them to maybe allocate some of the money that they've spent on ATVs or hunting equipment and maybe buy a shelter for $1,000 or buy a $30 weather radio?
I think you're incorrect in your belief that they actually own that. They don't. Most of that is on debt. And so I certainly agree that there is an element of personal responsibility throughout all of this. We all have responsibility with our lives. But it's one of those things where we say, we walk into somebody who is on SNAP benefits and they have a TV on the wall, that we remove their SNAP benefits. I don't know if that's the appropriate way to go about it. I think through education and through strengthening and enabling these people, which you do a good job of through information dissemination, is the way to go about it, rather than chastising them for having an ATV or whatnot.
All right, and again, that's not chastising them, but you see this stuff out in the country, and I see a lot of that. And the next question is, and again, I'm frustrated. I think everybody knows I'm frustrated. 23 people died down here when the warnings were so good. What we've done, we're at the end of our rope in the physical science world. So it's got to be this interdisciplinary thing where all you can help us out. What's the bottom line? Let's say I live in a mobile home. I'm out by myself. There's nobody within 15 miles. What does it cost to put a shelter in? What's the cheapest, good engineered shelter you can buy?
Well, can't you pick those up down at the corner in Oklahoma? I mean, they're roughly between $4,000 and $6,000 for installs out there, generic installs. But you have to
Well,
think
that's too much. That's too much money.
Exactly.
That's cost prohibitive.
Very much
So, well, what about community shelters? I know you guys have looked into that a bit. Kim, you've had some experience in that. Talk about the pros and cons of community shelters.
Well, Kim, do you want to take that one, or do you?
No,
Want me?
I think this has you written all over it, Stephen.
Out of my frustration on social media of all places, which seems so silly to be frustrated at social media, but I kept seeing this theme come up, people commenting on these posts about the Beauregard event, and these people need access to shelter, these people need access to better structures that they can shelter in, and there's a lot of issues that just come with this idea that shelters would be a magic bullet fix. We've already talked about one already, which is the cost for individual shelters. So the next step would be to say, what about community shelters? So there's FEMA compliant shelters, there's community designated shelters, which would be like the community says, hey, come to the gymnasium if there's a tornado warning. But there's a lot of things to consider when you're trying to call that the magic bullet solution, or at least make it the ultimate solution. Some things to consider is that highlighting my work, or Walker and Kim and all of our Vortex Southeast work, is once again, we come back to this idea of land use. And as James said, is they're 15 minutes, 20 minutes away. Well, if we're talking about lead times of 13 minutes, and most of them don't take action until the last possible minute, do we really want them getting in their cars and taking off? With low LCLs, fast-moving storms, there's a lot of concepts where we might create bigger issues than we think. Some other little issues here and there, or bigger issues, I should say, that we have to consider is there's been problems with deciding who opens up the shelter, who cleans it. They have mold a lot of times. They've bred other crime. Exactly. Do they allow pets? Believe it or not, pets are huge. People don't leave their pets at home. They won't do that. And the other thing that I think is really important, that I have a current paper in review. It's going through the whole slow research process tied to the Vortex Southeast, is really getting at that idea that these emergency managers, and we can't say this for sure yet, and this is where Kim and Mike Ignato and Kevin Ash are going to be digging into some of this work in the future, hopefully, is getting at, okay, these people know they need to get out of their mobile home. They know they need to get out of their permanent home that's weaker structurally speaking. But do they have access to a vehicle? Do they know where the shelter is? Just kind of about 6 months ago, I don't know if James remembers, but when I was working on creating this data, trying to figure out where all these community shelters were, I sent an email to James and said, do you guys have a list of all community shelters in your viewership area? And he said, I wish we did. We have some addresses, but there's no complete list that I can go on to Google, or I can get on my phone and say, let's go to this shelter here. That's a big problem. If you don't know where it is, and this is the first tornado warning you've experienced, or you're home alone, whatever it might be, there's a lot of factors that we have to consider. And what we find is people tend to want to shelter not necessarily the community shelters, but a neighbor or a friend or a family member. So we have to be careful with saying community shelters are the ultimate solution. The reality is they're a part of the solution. They're not the complete solution for a number of reasons. And unfortunately, I hate to keep doing this, but we're in a situation once again where there's not one perfect fix. And I'd love to be able to just say, let's fix it and do it. It just gets complicated. And that's why we need a team again.
Hey, Stephen, I'd like to get in here and ask you something real quick. South Carolina actually leads the nation in mobile homes, by population. We're 18%, I think 18.5%, something like that. But just like you said, there's no easy solution. What a lot of folks that aren't from the Southeast, I'm born and raised in South Carolina. I grew up in a mobile home in the country. I mean, just like what we're talking about here. There's 20 minutes to your local town. I mean, and then you have so many mobile homes that are put on these lots. And the way it goes down usually is you have a family or someone that has a substantial amount of land. They pass away. The land's handed down to their children. The children, sell it off to a developer that throws it into lots. And next thing you know, you got 50 mobile homes spread over 10 acres. And there's no good option. But going back to it, I don't know where to go either. I'm just right here with you guys too in South Carolina, because we face the same exact issues that's happening in Alabama, Georgia, and Mississippi.
Yeah, and I think Walker, you should speak to that a little bit about sort of your experience with that that land use issues and sort of what you think solutions are.
Yeah, I mean, as we know, and I think everybody who's lived in the South knows that the rural population down there is actually pretty dense. It's far denser than, say, Kansas or Oklahoma or even Illinois. And so rural out down there means pretty much exurban when you get to a city like Chicago or Illinois in my region. And so that's a lot more targets, a lot more things to hit. And so when you have that vulnerable housing stock spread across, it's only a matter of time before we have another March 3rd. And we've been lucky. The issue I think that all this comes back to is I always try to, again, put myself put myself in their shoes. What would I do if I was in a situation? And if I'm weather aware, first off, that's the thing. You got to be weather aware. You should know, you should be able to tune into James and say, hey, there's a severe weather threat tomorrow. And then here it is today. Let me keep an eye on it. And if there's suddenly a watch, I think for those people in very vulnerable housing, I think at that point, if you're personally responsible and you have the opportunity in the way, that's the time to start implementing your plan, not waiting until a warning. Now, I think with Kim's research and the group out at Sims, and they're trying to extend the length of warnings using some sophisticated techniques, that could bridge us in the near future, but that isn't here yet. And how do you communicate that information to the general public is another big thing to crack. But I think we need to be, if I was in a manufactured house or a weak framed home, I would be far more proactive. And I think all you have to do is look at the images from March 3rd and have that memory in the back of your mind when you're making those plans.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm a child of the 1970s, and there were no real weather warnings effectively to you as individuals. The Weather Service was issuing them, but getting them in rural Alabama. And my beloved Aunt Kathy had a mobile home, and I loved spending time there. And boy, I tell you what, we didn't have one real piece of weather information. It was her hanging out the back of the trailer, watching the lightning. And at a certain point, she made the call that we were going to the hole in the ground that my uncle had dug with a backhoe and reinforced with, cement blocks. And us and the spiders were going to be in there till this thing was over. So I was more scared of the spiders than I was the tornadoes, at that point. But that personal responsibility seemed to have been much more prevalent in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s before the media, before we came over and took over everybody's, personal responsibility situation. Somehow we used to care about the weather and we used to know about it and we used to want to learn, and now we got to get it out of an app or out of whatever. So I'm really concerned about that. But you had mentioned, Stephen, that you were, part of the Evansville tornado. And didn't a law come out of that required all manufactured homes to have weather radios or something to that effect? Did that work? Did it have any effect? What was the deal?
Well, that's an interesting point. That was sort of early when I decided to sort of get into meteorology as a child of the 90s. I remember very specifically discussing, as a kid, we had great plans. Stop, drop, and roll. Do you have a plan to get out of your house in the case of a fire? Do we run tornado drills? At some point as an adult, that has gone away. And that's sort of, to speak to your first point, that's a big issue with, as adults, we sort of neglect the preparation aspect. And we're really good at telling kids, and kids are sometimes better than adults at taking action. So that's one point. In terms of the Evansville tornado, what was really interesting, and back to James' point with ATVs, one of my mom's best friend's husband was killed in that event. And the reason they moved to a mobile home, they went from a single family, three-room mobile home because they wanted to save money. And they wanted to not focus on living in the mobile home, but doing other things in their life. So they made a conscious decision to move to that mobile home and acquire that risk. Well, tornado goes through, and now that haunts my mom's best friend for the rest of her life. Her husband died. And then they built the Habitat for Humanity homes for anybody who was affected by that event could move to these single family homes. They gave them weather radios. From a community standpoint in Evansville, the weather radio sort of ideas, and that concept has actually been really, I would say, pretty successful. But as we go on years and years later, it seems to be disappearing from my hometown's mind.
Bill, if I recall right, I think they proposed that.
Yeah, I don't know if it passed.
And we have a person who's worked on legislation in the panel here. So, I don't think it ever passed, though.
Yeah.
To build off that weather radio mantra per se, we keep circling back to the fact of, do people have weather radios or do they not? And if not, do they have a way to receive warnings? And I can tell you, my generation, these things, these iPhones are going to be the only way they receive warnings, because someone 20 years old is not going to go to Kroger and buy a weather radio when they can get that same information for free right here. And especially when they can control if they get it or not.
That's not going to help with those nocturnal tornadoes that are especially deadly in your region.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, going back to Bill's point about 5 minutes ago, how we become desensitized to Mother Nature and to the outside. We spend all day long in buildings with air conditioner, and we look at these things all day long. I think there's some element to that. I'm not a psychologist, and you don't want me to be one. But I would love to look into that sort of research and see what people have found.
Well, one thing that we do know that's happening is people are receiving these warnings via different methods and acting based on different things they prioritize. So they're prioritizing maybe the WEA alert they get on their phone versus maybe, I don't want to mention the 4-letter word siren, but they're prioritizing something else in their life. There has been some good success stories come out of the WEA alerts. Last year in Louisiana, there was a family that received the tornado warning in a mobile home. They fled to safety to their neighbor or to their relative who was in a permanent home. They came back to their mobile home being completely leveled and destroyed. So we do see people taking action. Unfortunately, what we see is not one clear-cut winner in that case. And that's why you got to have, and to Walker's point, you have to have multiple points of warning. You have to have multiple ways of receiving that warning to take action, whether it's a weather radio in your cell phone, a TV, and there's a lot of different ways you have to do it. And that's a big expectation and complicates things.
And just really quickly, we have some other questions from the panelists. I want to say, though, you brought up an important point, Stephen. That's something I found in my research with the public, that most people are quite attentive. And what we get in the business of doing with events like this is documenting the worst disasters. But we are not capturing what's happening with most of the population that is successful. We don't document success. That's not the business of disaster scientists. And it's unfortunate because it probably biases us to some degree about the condition of human nature and so on. But I think that we need to have more generalizable studies that demonstrate what the average person is doing, and not just, the one person who gets on the Weather Channel who somehow didn't know. And we say, well, that person's representative of everybody. Exactly. I mean, it's a worry that you hear from the weather community all the time. But I want to just get on here and assure our listeners, and I will say this again and again, we have a very interestingly weather attentive public out there. And I found this to be true in the Southeast, where there were people just like, Bill, was it your mother? Was your grandmother?
My aunt.
Your aunt? Mm-hmm. And actually the fact that was a woman is not uncommon either. I found that there was, in every family that I talked to, there was someone who was the designated weather weenie, and they were watching and they were shoving kids in closets and doing everything else and yelling at the people who were in the yard to get inside. And I mean, if you've watched the Rizzula's Tornado Video Classics videos, that's what you hear is there's some guy, usually a guy is filming the tornado and the wife in the background yelling, "Herb, get in the basement." I mean, it happens quite frequently that way. Anyway, I just thought that you brought up something really important there, and it's something that we should all take to heart.
And Kim, it's usually the wife yelling at the guy who's tweeting at the TV station for interrupting his golf, for the tornado warning. Hey, Kim, I gotta derail us for just a second. If you hold your head just right, it looks like you have a tiara on.
I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking the same thing.
So, but and Kim, maybe you can comment, or Stephen or Walker, maybe somebody knows on the panel. But I know the Weather Service was coming out with a sheltering infographic. Did that ever get released, or what was the status of that, and how did they address the manufactured housing issue?
I have a brief update. I don't know if anyone else was going to jump in with that, but I can say that it was supposed to be released last week, but they got quite a lot of feedback on their early draft, and it's in revisions. Yeah.
And I want to get in here, Kim, before we move on real quick with Stephen and Walker. But, I think one thing that we really haven't discussed is trust. And as simple as that sounds is, even though your cell phone may go off, even though you may have a weather radio that goes off, or even though you may see someone on TV talking about a tornado warning in your area, unless you trust that the warning is good and you trust that the information, I don't think you're going to be as likely to take action. And that's something I think some people in the weather community and across a lot of emergency management can do better jobs of doing, is having the trust with the people that, they protect. And the only way to do that is to actually, know the area that you're responsible for, know the people in the area, understand the social issues, understand the demographics, understand it all, and truly have back and forth communication, open lines all the time, and really develop those bonds that create trust. Because unless you have trust, the best warning in the world is not going to matter.
Right.
Amen.
Hey, Kim,
Amen.
And Stephen and Walker, and also Alex, for that matter. Kim, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. How long do we have the people's attention, the survivors in Lee County, Alabama, or even the survivors over in Columbus, Alex, that a couple of weeks ago? How long do we have their attention to sell them on this stuff? Because I know after a while it goes away, but how long do we have their attention to be able to sell them on weather safety, tornado safety, and these things they should be doing?
I think sort of, I can speak a little bit. This is a bit personal to me, is I always feel the need after these events to do analysis and get things out as quick as possible. The reason that I took to social media so quickly was because you have a limited window. And I would say in today's society, it's a day, 2 days, maybe a week at most to get some of these people's attentions, because it's not just the community of Beauregard and Lee County itself will feel this event for years, if not decades. Unfortunately, it's everybody else that you have to maintain their attention to actually make a difference. So you have to act quick. And I had, a large, I was talking about some tornado fatality statistics. Those are the things that we need to highlight quicker and as soon as possible so we can get in and start assessing these things. Unfortunately, you deal with very sensitive material. You deal with people who don't necessarily want to release that information. But it's also vital to understand the event as soon as possible to keep it fresh in people's minds. So to answer your question in a roundabout way, hours maybe, to keep people's attention, especially the ones that matter.
It's a matter of how long. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, just going to say in Gerald, Texas, and I think James knows, in Gerald, Texas, up the road here, back in 1997, a lower end EF5 tornado and 27 fatalities. And they have more underground shelters there now than they ever had. The city came back, they built back, because what they found, and when we talked to people, was everyone knew somebody in Gerald that was killed that day. And sometimes they knew entire families. The Igo family, entire family was killed. We have evidence they had gotten in a bathtub with the parents on top of them, but they died. But there's so many underground shelters there, and it really got people's attention. And so I guess really, Walker and Stephen and Kim, I just wonder, what point do people kind of fall back and begin to let up their guard again?
I don't know if we know an answer to that. I think it varies on the event. I think the images that people see. I think to the people that it really matters that they listen for long periods of time, it's the emergency managers. And you bring up a good point, is that you learn from the worst case scenarios. If there's anything I could do, I would take the leadership from Joplin and the leadership from Moore and have all the emergency managers, the code enforcers, the people that write the code, have all those people at a big conference and have those people in Joplin and Moore tell their stories. Or it could be in Alabama. You could pick the April 27th communities that were affected and have those emergency managers, the best practices, what was successful and what failed, that has to permeate out in the community. I'm not so sure that at the individual level, if you haven't been directly affected by one of these terrible events, I'm not so sure in this day and age when news flies by at Twitter speeds, I'm not so sure how much value we get out of an event.
Well, I'll tell you, Walker, one thing, I'm going to go back, James, I'm watching you. NWA, Birmingham, forget what year it was. We had the people come over from Tuscaloosa. I still remember every minute of that session that night, hearing those people talk, those people that James knows, and people that were in Tuscaloosa. And you sat there in that ballroom, and we just sat there and listened to the stories. I think you make a very good point, Walker.
I want to dovetail on something Walker just said, if I may, too, because it made me think about it in the context of community leaders and EMA folks. Here in Wichita County, we have a wonderful county commissioner here, Woody Gossam, just a real servant of the people and a servant's heart. But a couple of years ago, they found themselves with a little extra money, and I think it was something to do with road grant or highways or something like that. And rather than give that money back, he went to the state and he said, well, can we keep it? And they eventually got permission, and it was a yes. And what they did with that money was put it out there to subsidize storm shelters. Anybody who wants to put in a storm shelter, and we actually took advantage of it in at my house. We put one in a couple of years ago after we moved here, and they paid for half. It was a $4,000 installation, and the county, through their approval process, paid for half. So if we can maybe find, motivated community leaders, as Walker said, or county judges or county leaders or EMA people to sniff around even a little bit here and there helps.
There is FEMA grants available to build shelters, and what you need is a leader or a mobile home park operator or somebody to write that application. And it funnels off to DC and gets filtered, but there is money available at the federal level.
Yep.
What can we do, Walker and Stephen and the broadcast community, to be better? I thought for Lee County, Josh Johnson and Shane Butler and the people in Montgomery and Columbus, Georgia, did a really remarkable job of outlining the threat and the danger. What can we do to be better? I mean, we're just frustrated. We're very frustrated. What do we need to be doing here?
Well, I guess I think one of the reasons for motivations of putting 150,000 little yellow dots on a map over a summer is not just so I can create cool maps or create interesting analyses. It's to give that data to emergency managers and media officials and folks like yourself, James. And I think the impact that data has available is to identify those individuals, or at least those communities that you can reach out to and educate. I think we can focus a lot more on the education side of things. And I think that's the key to it, is maintaining that education of tornado awareness and what you can do from childhood all the way through adulthood and making it a priority. That's the only way I can really think about tackling this. And education seems like a cop-out, but I really do think that's the key to reaching out these individuals. And it goes beyond the mobile home residents. It's educating everybody from the integrated warning teams down to the individual residents, and then circling back to educate and teach folks like myself, Kim and Walker, who are doing the research. It's a very strong feedback loop, but you have to dive in somewhere. I like to think of it as jumping on the merry-go-round at some point. You have to dive in and ride it around a few steps, jump off, and then jump back on, and so on and so forth. But you have to really go understand that individual decision-making process.
I think in some of these situations, James, that when a meteorologist on TV is pinpointing a tornado, and they did a marvelous job, they did a great job, they were calm and collected, it's too late in many cases. Back to Kim's point, we don't know all the success stories, though. So there was likely a tremendous number of people that got that instantaneous information and took shelter. We don't know those numbers, though. But for the people that were killed, particularly in these vulnerable housing, the warning was too late. let's say a minute. Let's say we issued the warning, and the warning, they had 12 minutes lead time. Most people don't receive it in 12 minutes. Let's say they had a minute or 2 or 3 to do something. It's way, way, way too late at that point to have increased odds of survivability in a manufactured house. So I'm a big proponent of thinking ahead of time, and somewhere between that watch issuance and the warning issuance, people that are in these vulnerable housing have to think ahead. I realize that there's work. I realize that there's food. I realize that there's issues of life, but we have to plan a little bit ahead in these very vulnerable houses. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think just to wrap this up, I know we've got to roll Tony Rice here from James in a minute, but I think it's important to note that while getting to a public shelter or some FEMA accredited shelter is a laudable goal, to get better, people don't have to get to something even that spectacular. If you have a family member or friend who lives in a well-built home anywhere near you, then getting to that will increase your odds of survival to almost perfect. From the few epidemiological studies that do exist after big tornadoes, we have found that if you're in a well-built home, even in EF5 damage, your odds of survival are something like 98 to 99%. And that is remarkably good. And that is not being underground necessarily. That is just being in a well-built structure in an interior room away from windows with as many walls between you and the outdoors as you can get. So I think a message that's super empowering that broadcasters can put out to people, maybe, they have to think about this before they get the warning, but maybe not that far ahead. If you have something worked out, if you just have a plan of a place to go, a friend to go to, a family member to go to who is close by, that will be absolutely not just okay. That will be a tremendous asset to you, and it will help you tremendously. And that is something we need to tell the people who we're talking with over and over and over again. It's not just that you're at risk, it's that you can be safe, and there's an easy way to be safe.
Awesome. Let's take a quick break for Tony Rice. We're going to come back with more discussion. We're going to have the picks of the week, the email inbox. Well, probably not this week. See, Aubrey probably no. Yeah, she's got the same problem I do. We have to do television. So we'll do a double email inbox next week, but we'll do weather roundup, picks of the week, and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along. Uh-oh, I forgot my PSA.
Hi, my name is Phil Johnson. I'm the co-host of Stormfront Freaks podcast, the most entertaining weather podcast on your listening device. And here's a message to get you weather ready. The spring season is here, and we want to prepare you for spring weather threats, which includes tornadoes, lightning, flooding, and thunderstorms. No matter what type of severe weather you may experience, it is important to have a plan in place so you can communicate with your family and friends in the event of a disaster. Know who you would contact for updates, and also determine ahead of time where you and your family can meet. For more information, please visit the NOAA Weather Ready Nation website at weather.gov/WRN.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
There's a pair of happenings in the sky this week. They're of note. The March equinox arrives on Wednesday, and this marks the beginning of astronomical spring here in the Northern Hemisphere. Since this is measured by Earth's trip around the sun, it occurs at the same instant in all time zones. 21:58 UTC this year, or 5:58 p.m. Eastern, 4:58 Central, and so on. This is when the sun is directly over the equator. That subsolar point will continue to move northward until it's directly above the Tropic of Cancer at the June solstice. Completely unrelated to the coming equinox, the moon will reach perigee, or the closest point in its orbit to Earth, on Tuesday, March 19th. It'll be just 359,000 kilometers away. The moon will be fully illuminated on Thursday, the 21st, or a full moon, having only receded by a little more than 1,000 miles. That's good enough for government work, and it's good enough for a supermoon. Now, supermoons don't happen every month because the moon's orbital period, also known as the anomalistic month, is 27.55 days, while the time it takes to go from full moon to full moon, or the synodic month, is 29.53 days. This is why we only see a couple of supermoons per year, and why they tend to be bunched together. You might not see this March's full moon on some list of supermoons because there's little agreement on what actually defines the concept. Some definitions are based on distance, others are based on the time since or until perigee. There's not much scientific about the whole business anyway. The term was invented by an astrologer writing for one of the horoscope magazines that you might find at the supermarket checkout. So just go outside and enjoy the big, beautiful full moon, especially near moonrise or set, where it will look the biggest to your eyes. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
And I guess the show comes back to me. James has gone away. So, Kim, I guess it's you and I leading the show at this point. So, yeah, I wanted to say April 4th is the day that we, in the National Weather Association and other parts of the Weather Ready Nation enterprise, talk about using our social media. Since is Kevin here? And Kevin's gone, so we can talk about social media again. The Safe Place Selfie social media opportunity gives us a chance to use that hashtag to promote, where we go in our safe places. I'll be in a school that day teaching a weather balloon class, and I'm wondering if I'm going to be able to squeeze all those kids into the hallway and take a safe place selfie that day. So, Kim, are y'all doing a safe place selfie where you are and there at Sims that day, or you'll probably be down here in Alabama knocking around in April, won't you?
Gosh, what day is it again?
April 4th at
April
11 a.m.
All right. I'll actually I should ask Walker and Stephen if they're going to be there. I'm going to be at the Association of American Geographers annual meeting. I think that's when I'll be traveling there. You guys going this year?
No,
not this.
You're fond of Washington D.C. I'm not so fond of it.
Yeah.
So Walker and Stephen, can y'all hang around for a little bit, or do you have to go?
Sure, we can hang around.
Okay, outstanding. So, Alex, I wanted you to spend just another minute and get into some more details of the Mississippi State Symposium, because it's always one of the highlights of everyone's year. Talk about the theme, and you talked about some of the great panelists and stuff. Talk about the keynotes that are coming up, and a few logistics for last-minute registrants.
Yeah, so registration for our symposium is open until Wednesday for the pre-registration prices, and then that will close, and then registration will, of course, occur at the door. We've got 5 keynotes this year, one of which is the director of the National Weather Service, Dr. Louis Usolini, Janice Huff, who's the chief meteorologist at WNBC in New York, Aubrey Urbanowitz, who is the chief meteorologist at WHSV in Harrisonburg, Eric Rasmussen, who is the project manager for Vortex Southeast, and Will Simmons, who did his undergrad here at Mississippi State, worked here for a couple of years. He is a part of the Hurricane Hunters based out of Biloxi. So it's a really exciting weekend. Like I said, we've got 5 weather service offices, 6 universities, 7 TV stations, and these are just people presenting, not including people attending. And really, this year's lineup is awesome. It's on our website, eastmsnwaams.com. The agenda's on there, registration, and I want to give a quick shout out to all the executive board, because this conference is entirely student-led. There's no professors or anybody. Well, they're helping us along the way, but they're not overseeing us doing the project. These are all student-based decisions. So Lauren Pounds, our president, Marty Calhoun, vice president, I'm the secretary, Shannon Faulkner is our treasurer, and then Reggie Rokes and Madison Campbell are the 2 symposium chairs for this year.
So, Alex, are you still giving out those cool cowbells to all the keynotes?
I don't want to give away any surprises.
Okay, Aubrey. I don't know whether you're getting a cowbell or not, so you just have to. You may have to buy one in Starkville.
I wouldn't be concerned about buying one.
There you have it. So, how much will the event set us back, Alex? I wish I were going to be able to come this year. I'm going to be in Ireland, unfortunately, at a WeatherBrains meetup in Dublin. But how much will it set everyone else back who's coming?
So we were actually able to keep the same prices this year as we had last year. So it's $20 for our chapter members here, $25 for all other students, and $45 for professionals, which to me is extremely awesome for this lineup, especially given some of the other costs associated with other weather conferences around the U.S.
Absolutely. $45. That's outstanding. And drop that much at Pap's place for dinner, right? Over there in whatever that place is, James drags us for dinner every year. So anyway, Kim, can we go on? Can we keep going, or do we need to? Or does anybody need to go to bed early tonight?
We're good.
All right. My question, and this is not directly related except to the Lee County tornado, because there had been tornado warnings on that storm for, at least 2 or 3 hours before it got there. So that raised the question, if you were paying attention that day, even in Lee County, you had plenty of time probably, even before the tornado warnings were issued, to move out of the way. But I was watching Josh Johnson, one of our friends, via the internet here, his coverage. He was using one of those Barron touchscreen things, and he was going 900 miles an hour, swapping between radars, swapping between products. And I thought he was doing a fantastic job. And I raised the question within the WeatherBrains crew, I really like what Josh is doing here. What is this product? James immediately responded, hey, that's the Barron product. I worry that it's distracting. Because earlier we talked about technology being an important part of people like Alex's life. Younger people today live and die by that. Where, James says, hey, I like it where, the meteorologist is just on the screen. Somebody else is running the show in the background. I don't want to see all the transactions and stuff. Now, Nate Johnson, has a very important position with NBC, the O&Os came and said, I disagree. I think younger people like this. They identify with it. Alex, comment on that, and then Kim, Steve, and Walker join in and say what you think about that.
So the number one thing I found with broadcasts, especially getting in the field, is that people are looking and are being engaged with stuff they can't get on their phone. And having the interaction with radar, velocity, correlation coefficient, all of that, you're not getting that on your phone, and especially with someone talking over that, explaining it all to you. So it all goes back into kind of the way media is going as a whole. You've seen a rise in more detailed investigative journalism, and that is directly tied to people's want for information, and it's something that they're not going to necessarily get everywhere else, because they're not going to be sitting there reading the same stories that you can get from ABC, NBC, Fox, CNN, MSN, all of these places. They want these individualized, specialized stories that, you're not just going to open up all 5 apps and see the same thing.
So you're a special case, because you're smarter, you're a weather nerd, What about the person down at Dollar General, Kim? How do they feel about that?
How do they feel about
technology? Would they rather have it dumbed down, or all these weather savvy people that you're talking about? Do they like that? Is it James's bucket of spilled paint, or is it, does that draw them into the learning process?
From a research perspective, we don't have a really good answer for that, and it's for a simple reason. It's that broadcast data is notoriously difficult to analyze. It's hard enough to analyze text-based data if you have like a transcript of an interview, doing a thematic coding analysis, so really getting into the meaning behind the words and trying to put together what several different people believe into a cohesive story. It's kind of hard, but visual data, you have to sit and watch it and do a sort of visual coding analysis. I will say, at the lab, we're trying to work with private sector companies that have artificial intelligence capabilities to feed that data into the artificial intelligence and then get out of it some of this meaning that we can then do a more traditional coding analysis, thematic analysis with. Because what you're talking about is an essential question. We don't know answers to basic questions like that. In the social sciences, people could opine, and there could be some relatable studies that are done, but nothing that's directly, this broadcast showed this, and this is what people did as a result, or this is what people understood as a result. It's sort of a black box, and what's analyzed now is largely the Weather Service warning content, and then we try to understand a little bit about what people on the ground might have done. That's a really rough way to do it, because we know that broadcasters are so vitally important to the way the messages are conveyed and understood. So I hate to throw up my hands and say I don't know yet, but I can say that I'm trying to develop a technique that can help us to know.
That's exciting. So Chris, you mentioned trust. Trusting your broadcaster, that becomes a critical part of that. Maybe that sorts a lot of this out. Certain people will go toward broadcaster A because they offer that. certain ones will go toward broadcaster B because they take a different approach. What's your thoughts on that?
Definitely. I mean, just me being from Columbia here, we got Jim Gandy. He's over at WLTX, the CBS affiliate, and he's been South Carolina's weatherman since I knew what a television was. Mm-hmm. So everybody kind of looks to him, for the big stuff, especially here in the Columbia area. And I can tell you, just me personally, coming up through my, I guess, middle late 20s now, I'm 34 now, and with what James does in Alabama is nothing short of incredible. Of knowing the street level type communities, locations, landmarks. It just shows that he knows the area that he's talking about, and I think that helps build a ton of trust with people that may not have ever known you or got to talk to you or anything like that. But if you can tell them about some store that's right down the road, they're going to listen to you. Maybe more than the guy that got here 3 weeks ago that's just looking at the radar data. That while maybe telling you something that's also accurate, he's just not giving the same, I guess, attention to detail that really separates good from great.
I'm really interested in that question, Kim. That just focus group, different people, understanding whether that coverage was distracting or whether it was engaging. I think that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. It's a really interesting question. I think what you were just speaking to with Chris talking about the geographic specificity and trust, I think that's something that we can. I just from the interviews that I've done, I can say makes an enormous difference, that relatability. So while I might not be able to speak specifically to these particular visual technologies and their distractibility or their ability to enhance comprehension, I can say that there are things that broadcasters can do to be relatable.
Absolutely.
And that might be number one. And then these other things are secondary concerns possibly to that.
Right. I totally agree. And one thing I could probably hit off that a little bit more, while I know I don't have a PhD, nor will I ever pretend to, like in social sciences or anything like that, when it comes to crisis communication and communication when it truly matters, 15 years of being a firefighter and seeing the things I've seen and doing the things I've done, you really get a tune in how to communicate with almost any person you run across and communicate very simply and have their trust and get a truthful answer. And, I think that's just something more to look into, especially from the social sciences standpoint, from the people that are doing the research. Go visit the firefighters that, might have been there, the first boots on the ground, immediately after the incident happened, because something that we ran into in 2015 here in Columbia, we had some of the worst flooding we've ever had, and almost the first 48 hours of that flood, and me and 20 other guys rescued 198 people. And I can tell you, out of those 198 people, we ferried in boats, swam through streets and everything else. The resounding answer from almost everybody was they didn't think it would happen to them. And so I get a little jaded, and people may think I have a bad outlook because of stuff like that, but it's just what I've seen. I've gotten to talk to people, and they give me truthful answers, and so that's why I really preach on the communication and outreach side of it, because I think it's so important.
It is. I very much appreciate that, and you'll be heartened to know that exact kind of experience you have is something that when we are developing technologies to try to improve communication in the lab, we're actually bringing in emergency managers, emergency response personnel, and you should look at, if you're interested with that kind of experience, you'd be a really valuable participant.
This is Kim's recruiting show here. She does most of her work.
For some scientific fun, I'm good with it.
Yeah, it's gonna be great.
Stephen, you mentioned, your mapping of mobile home locations, manufactured home locations in Alabama and Kansas. That data seems really important, to me as a broadcaster. Has anyone approached you about using that data in some meaningful way, either at the government, emergency management, broadcast level?
Yeah, so actually when we were writing the grant about 2 years ago to hopefully get funding, which we ultimately received, we actually had a letter of support from James. So James was really supportive of using that data. And then once I created that data, what I was able to do was share with him and his producers the data that they can actually use live on air if they want to, behind the scenes. However they choose, I was able to actually share that directly with him. So theoretically, James knows exactly where just about 95% of all his mobile home residents live in his viewership. And of course, I'm wanting to share that data more and more with anybody who wants it. Right now, our data is limited to Alabama and Kansas, but we're working on new ways to expand that data, hopefully with some future funding, but at the same time, keeping me from spending months and months and hours at the computer screen using some interesting techniques. So yeah, I'm happy to share that with anybody, and I will share it to the greatest extent that I can without getting sued by the company that I purchased the landmark data from. So,
Well, I learned one thing that the PR firms can use. That it sounds like mobile homes are much safer in Kansas than they are in Alabama. So that's probably coming to a campaign near us pretty soon.
Yeah.
I better be quiet, Kim. Better be quiet. So, Walker, anything you want to throw in that we missed along the way?
No, I think you brought up the recent discussion on cognitive biases. That's a fancy term, and talking about these what we call optimism bias and normalcy bias, the fact that we don't think that an event will occur to us. We're all guilty of these biases. We're all driving down the road going above the speed limit. We don't think that we'll ever be the one in the wreck. So we have this tendency to look at people and say, why didn't they do this? When we're guilty of the same thing over and over again.
Absolutely.
The cognitive bias thing is so fascinating, and I'm sure Kim can speak lots to this issue. We're complex human beings, and every one of us is different. But removing these biases from our brains is not an easy task. I will leave it to Kim to explain it, but she still probably can't remove it from my brain.
Yeah,
I guess
knowing
I'm
what to
just
do
a-
about it
I'm
is the hardest part.
I'm just a fraidy cat, I guess, and it probably comes from those child of the '70s things. We went to the movie with our kids Saturday night, and the older kids went to see Captain Marvel, and we went to see, whatever the kids movie was that's out right now with our, younger child. But when he came out, the other three didn't come out, for 20 minutes after the movie, and I went and checked. The movie theater had let out. I panicked. I'm one step from calling the police. We get the theater management, we're like panicking, and the guy's like, oh, lost kid, happens all the time. We call the other parents, I'm going through all these conspiracy theories, their phones are turning off, we're sounding the find iPhone alarms, and the phones are disappearing. And I'm like, oh, they are halfway to a foreign country already. I'm literally this close to, creating a major ruckus, getting Span to tweet it out. Have you seen these children? And, here they come strolling they'd gone in the wrong auditorium. And of course, we had ordered food for them. It's one of these places where they can bring you hamburgers and French fries, and they said, we were really mad because the people next to us took our food. I'm like, you were in the wrong theater. Was it any clue that the movie didn't start for an hour after you were in there? So, I always think, how would this play? Because, you just said, people always say, well, why didn't they do something? I'm always filtering what I do through that exact filter. Why didn't they do anything? Because what if they had been kidnapped? And what if I hadn't called the police? And what if blah, 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 blah. So we need a little more scaredy cat, I think, Kim, in our world.
Yeah.
I mean, just to jump in here real quick, I can just tell you, when I'll take a tornado warning from NWS Columbia, and I'll put it on my personal or my Facebook blog, South Carolina Weather, that I have, and it never fails. And I'm not picking on anybody, but literally the first 10 comments I get is it going to hit my house? Yeah, respect the polygon, heed the warning, people. Yeah, and just
respect the polygon.
It's tough.
Yeah, it is tough. I mean, it's we could have a whole show on just this topic of how this exact thing is very tough. But from the dispassionate perspective of the rational person, you have to be somewhat risk averse to make the investment to get something like a shelter for your home, given just how unlikely it is that you will be hit. Even in Oklahoma, I was surprised to learn when I was a grad student here, just how often any particular point is expected to be hit by a tornado. What would you guess that the return frequency is? It's on the order of once every couple thousand years, and that's in Oklahoma.
More.
Huh?
Unless it's more.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
there's certain points. I mean, this is what happens when you sort of if you think about rolling dice on a board. I probably made this example before, but if you think about rolling dice on a board several thousand times, and where do they fall? They're not going to fall just in a perfect grid, one die inhabiting each dot, or some number of die inhabiting each dot evenly. There'll be some clusters that just kind of happen. And that's what we think that we're seeing, because we have no reason to believe there's anything different going on from a physical science perspective. That's what we think we're seeing in a place like Moore. But, it's hard not to read into that. As from the ground level, we live in and inhabit cities and towns, and these geographies are meaningful to us. And it turns out that we take that information and do stuff with it. It's a tough challenge. It's really hard to compare perspectives and get people to think on those levels.
You speak to that risk, and that's something that I think people in the Mid-South forget, and the Southeast in general. The risk of a person being affected by a tornado is actually greater in Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia than it is in Oklahoma and Kansas. It's the footprint that matters. And as we saw with the long track on May 3rd, that's far different than a violent tornado that sits over a rural farm in Kansas. So I wish that we could impart on people in the South that they are at a greater risk than those folks in Tornado Alley, wherever the heck that is.
Yeah.
That would go a long way, I think, towards making people realize that they're under, although it's a small chance, there is still a risk down there.
Absolutely. Well, this is a great conversation. Thank you guys so much for being on the show, both our guest panelists and our guests. It's been a compelling conversation. I want to close us out today, moving us to our picks of the week. And for those who are now scrambling, maybe thinking, what are the picks of the week? I don't know if Walker and Steve and I warned you about this, but it's something that we share, just something that's even loosely weather, climate related, of interest or of note from the previous week, or just any time that you think it would be really wonderful to share something you'd like to highlight. So I'm going to go down the line with everyone who remains. I'll start from the left on my screen is actually Alex. Do you happen to have anything to share for your pick of the week?
I do. My mic is okay. Yeah, I had to make sure my mic was unmuted. So there's a major flood event going on up in Nebraska right now, and the National Weather Service in Omaha got evacuated to the National Weather Service in Hastings. So they've got a double operation going on there right now, and option too, because it really has not been in the national media the past couple of days. So I know a couple of people who work at the Weather Service office there in Omaha, so I know they're going through what could be a hard time right now. So just good luck to all those people up there who are having to deal with this situation.
So your pick of the week may be the tweet of them evacuating?
I have the link. I'll send that to you right now.
All right, great. Thank you. All right, so next on my list here is Bill. Bill, what do you have for us this week?
I want you to do the foghorn, Kim, since James is not my pick are all the great guests that are coming up. We've had fantastic guests tonight. Thank you, Kim, for arranging this. Just a fantastic show, and you're gonna have like part 2 of this coming up in July. That's going to be really exciting. But next week, the indomitable, if that's a word, Chuck Doswell will be the guest. So it's going to be James and Chuck Doswell unleashed next week. So you want to make sure you tune in for that. I'll be watching from Ireland at 2:30 in the morning. So I'm really excited about that. But we've got a lot of great shows coming up that we've already mentioned. But we're busy all the way through June now with shows. So we'll be looking forward to all those, Kim.
All right, great. Thanks, Bill. And next, I've got Chris. Chris, do you have something interesting you'd like to share, or we can come back to you?
No, absolutely. We're good.
Okay.
Let me go to share my screen here. All right. So you guys have snow up north for all the people that's up in northern Michigan or somewhere else. But in the southeast, we have pollen. One of my followers the other day on Twitter, I got this great thread going about I should petition the National Weather Service to include the criteria of pollen blizzard.
Wow.
You know, kind of as a lighthearted joke, and gosh, the response was great. Even one of my friends caught pollen on her security camera, so that was pretty neat. Figured I'd share that.
Wow.
Makes me sneeze just looking at it.
Geez, well, good luck with that. Oh, man. All right. Well, let's move along down the line here. We've got Stephen. Stephen, do you have something you'd like to share? You actually have something readily shareable that relates to the topic of the night if you'd like to share it, but I don't know if there's anything else.
Can I get a hint? I don't know. My Twitter? I don't know.
Your Twitter, your blog. All things.
Well, I think I had to think on my feet for a second, and I didn't want to just say, you know, my tweets or my maps, whatever it might be. But one of the things that sort of sparked this interest in looking at hazards in society is a book that actually, when I was I believe a second-year master's student, Walker had me read for one of his classes, and it's by Ted Steinberg, and it's called The Acts of God. And it's an older book, but it's one of those books where I'll read every maybe year or so, and it really highlights this intersection of vulnerability, the things we talked about today, as well as weather hazards, whether it's flooding, tornadoes. There's a section about Hurricane Katrina. But it's a really good book that that really, I think, bridges the gap nicely between sort of the physical hazards that we face versus society, and it puts things in a unique perspective. So it's a good summary of what sort of set the passion in me quite a few years back.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. With that, moving on to Troy. Troy, what do you have for us tonight?
Well, I've got, and this is a website, Kim, that I've been always kind of linked to. I love it. I love to see weather service offices that do this. But the weather office up in Louisville, if you go do a search, and we've got the web address that I've passed along, but it's actually Louisville's training documents they have online. If you've never been to that before, Louisville does one of the best jobs in the country with putting a bunch of their scientific training documents online, and everything about severe weather, heavy precipitation, winter weather, just miscellaneous, Doppler weather radar, a bunch of stuff there. If you've never seen their webpage, I wanted to give them sort of a hats off tonight and caps off and salute to them, because I think it's a great website, great resources.
Fantastic. All right. Thanks for the share. And my final person I'm going to pick on here, Walker, have you had time to think of something you would like to share?
Oh, yeah. I always have to share my favorite website on the internet. And that is produced by a very big company by the name of, you may have heard of it, Google. And it's not google.com, but it's Google Earth Engine, which is Landsat imagery, so satellite imagery going all the way back to 1984. And you can go anywhere in the world and watch the landscape change from 1984 to 2016.
Really?
You get a sense as to how humans are mastering this planet in more ways than one. So I invite you to take a look at Google Earth Engine. And a shout out to Stevens. He was humble, but check out his Twitter feed and check out the blog on circling back to manufactured housing. Check out his blog.
Wonderful. Well, speaking of being humble, and especially because Alex, you took what I was intending to talk about, I'm going to go ahead and promote Walker and his work. I made reference to a paper that I think has so influenced this body of research and a lot of scholarship in this area. Walker's paper from 2007, Weather and Forecasting. So I think that's an essential read if you are interested in this area. Absolutely essential read.
Do you take Apple Pay?
Let's buy me a beer the next time we get together, Walker. That'll be great.
It'd be the first money any WeatherBrains panelist ever made.
Wow. That's good to know. All right, and with that, I think just thank you all so much for a wonderful show. It's been incredibly interesting.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on as well, to everybody.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Good luck with the Capital Weather Group, Carolina Weather Gang. I just can't get it right.
Whichever. Yeah, Carolina Weather Group. Look forward to doing more of this in the future. I enjoy it.
Say hello to everyone over there for us.
Will do. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yep. Good night.
Good night.
Nope. They're done. All right. It's that magical time where we simulcast Song of the Night on Instagram and the WeatherBrains live feed. This can be very confusing. But the great show tonight. Great having Stephen and Walker on the show talking about some very important social science aspects of these tornado outbreaks. And I appreciate their friendship and their willingness to come on the show and talk about it. Again, Kim is going to be down here, Kim Cloco McLean, doing her work in Lee County, apparently late this week. And we'll get more data back from these guys soon. But it's great having them on the show. But thank you guys for watching on the WeatherBrains side. If you want to join us on Song of the Night, follow me on the Insta. I am SpanWX. But thank you guys for watching. Have a great week and God bless.